Welcome to C&S-Sports podcast, everyone. I am Sam. That's Christian, and we have lots to talk about. Kind of a slow week in sports, but we're going to get through it. Let's start.
NBA playoffs. How concerned should the Warriors be after Boogie's injury?
I think especially after how hot the Rockets are, I think the Rockets are one team they should definitely be worried about now because they got a 2-0 lead over the Jazz. And even Boogie coming off of his injury towards the end of the season, he looked pretty solid for coming off that bad of an injury. So I definitely think the Warriors should be concerned for their future in this postseason. How about you?
Kevon Looney and Andrew Bogut are not Boogie cousins. That much is certain. However, the Warriors have won titles without Boogie before, but I don't think this is the same Warriors team.
It definitely is not. No.
And I don't think Houston's the biggest threat. I do think Houston could put up a fight, but I still think the Warriors win that series in about 6 games. But when they get to the finals, and I think it'll be against Milwaukee, I think that Milwaukee team's a lot better than the last couple of Cavs teams.
Oh, easily, yeah.
So I don't know. I definitely think that in the Western Conference they'll be fine, but once it comes to the finals, that's where they would worry me. I don't see how Kevon Looney and Andrew Bogut are going to chase Brook Lopez around the 3-point line unless they plan on going small ball all series with Iggy. But Iggy's getting old, and I don't know if they can do that against Mike Budenholzer in a 7-game series. I think he's too good of a coach. They haven't faced a coach that good in the finals either. So I definitely think for winning a championship they should be worried. But the Western Conference, I think they have that on lock still.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to say go off the bat and say the Jazz are. I do think they're a somewhat overrated team in the playoffs. I mean, the Rockets have dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the season, but I think they're coming into this postseason hotter than they were last year, and they can't recall off the top of my head. They have almost an entire healthy squad, and James Harden, who I guess a spoiler, use my player of the week, coming off we'll read his stat line later on, but coming off an MVP night last night against the Jazz, and now they have a 2-0 lead. So I still think the Warriors should be concerned for Houston. So moving on to Blake Griffin. Now, I do think even if Blake Griffin were to play, I still think this would have been a bye series basically for Milwaukee. So there's kind of reports and rumors going around that Blake Griffin, he's out for the series, he's out for the entire playoffs for his knee injury. But now he's kind of stirring the ball and getting the attention of it that he's wanting to play. And we're about to be on game 3, and they're down 2-0. And I think it's the postseason, and Dwayne Casey, who I think is like an unbelievable, I think he's a lot better of a coach than people say he is. He took a mediocre to below average Pistons to the playoffs, and I think if Blake Griffin wanted to play that bad, he would have been in the game 1. What do you think?
I honestly am questioning whether or not he's ducking Giannis at this point with not playing. They've said he's been at practicing. They say he's lobbying to play. If he wanted to play so bad, why is he not playing? That's my one and only question. Giannis will sprain his ankle in game 43 of the regular season, and he's upset that he doesn't get to play the rest of the game. This is the playoffs. If he can't walk, fine. That's one thing. But he's up jumping around on the bench, yelling at the referees, getting technical fouls in each of the first 2 games. At this point, you kind of have to question what's going on there, because it seems to me that he just doesn't want to get in this series, but he doesn't want it to look that way because that's a bad look.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, it's looking like even more that Milwaukee's just going to sweep the Pistons first round. And I think it's kind of hard to tell at this point if Blake Griffin's actually going to play if he really wanted to. I think if Milwaukee wins Game 3 for sure, then he's gone. Like Blake Griffin's not going to play. But honestly, like I'm not really worried about it because the Pistons didn't really stand a chance if they were to beat the Bucks in the first round. But yeah. So moving on to MLB. So we've went through a lot of teams in the past few weeks that have struggled with pitching, and one team that definitely it's the NL Central. You're talking the Chicago Cubs. Their bullpen is a mess, and their starting rotation isn't much better. Yeah, the Brewers have a struggling rotation, but like the Cubs have a veteran rotation, and it's kind of like annoying to me, like hearing people say that the Brewers rotation sucks when you can't base it off of 5 to 6 starts. And now their bullpen has quite a few veterans in Josh Hader. And now they got Jeremy Jeffress back this Monday. What do you think that return means in regards to the Brewers? And let's not forget Jimmy Nelson's coming back. They'll be back. He'll be back sometime next month. I believe it's beginning or end of May. So what do you think the return of Jeffress means for Milwaukee?
I think it could be very good for Milwaukee, but that's if he's 2018 Jeremy Jeffress. And yesterday, he didn't look like 2018 Jeremy Jeffress. He threw his fastest pitch yesterday was 93 miles an hour. He didn't throw his curveball at all. I'm a little bit worried about those 2 aspects of his arsenal because his 4-seamer and his curveball is what made him an all-star last year, and him throwing 93 is not going to get it done this year. So I'm very cautious about what that return means at the moment if he doesn't start rounding into form.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll give him till at least around June. And I think if he's not improving at all, I think they consider sending him down to the AAA to have him develop. He's coming off a shoulder injury, and you could tell in the NLCS back in October that he was definitely hurting in that series. He was playing with that shoulder injury. Now, this has been going around for quite some time. Tim Anderson bat flipped as soon as he homered. I guess, do you think this is a controversy? What do you think? Like, what do you think this means for baseball? Like, what could we see changing?
So Tim Anderson more than bat flipped. I mean, he full on threw his bat like 25 feet after really watching and admiring a home run he hit in I think the 4th or 5th inning in an April 17th game against the Kansas City Royals. Both teams are under 500. I just think, and now I hate to sound like a grouchy old man, but I just don't think that's the time or place for it. If you hit a walk-off, sure, do what you want, I guess. But it was the 4th or 5th inning, like I said. I just don't think that you should be pimping home runs like that early in the game when your team's not very good and you're playing another not very good team. I also think that Brad Keller handled it terribly by throwing at him. And then obviously the benches cleared and things got a little bit rowdy, especially with Rick Renteria, the manager of the White Sox. So I think that whole situation was bad, and I think players need to chill out in middle innings in a game in April against when it's two under 500 teams.
Yeah, and I guess here I'll read this quote. Here's what he said: "I'm going to continue to be me, continue to play the game hard and how I know how to play it. I don't have any rules. I play fun. I play to have fun. And I play it. I play with a lot of energy." What does that quote mean to you?
Yeah, I get having fun. I understand that. It's a game. You're playing a game.
Like,
It's not that serious, but
I guess
let's
if it's like August, September, and you're getting close to the playoffs, then I understand. But if you're doing this and the season just started, you're in the first month of the season. Like, I get like a small bat flip, but if he's just doing this with attitude, and the White Sox are just like you said before, they're under 500. I don't think there's any reason for a bat flip, especially as aggressive as he did that. Um, but yeah, it depends, and I think if it was later in the season, closer to the playoff, and they were in the run for it, by all means, go for it. But I don't think it was necessary to be as aggressive as he did, especially this early in the season when their
yeah,
team was under 500.
yeah. And Brad Keller shouldn't be throwing at him. Don't let's not do that. Let's if you want to throw behind his back, go ahead, but don't actually hit him. Like
Yeah,
what Chris Archer did to Derek Dietrich when he just threw behind his back. Yeah, sure, do that. Don't hit the guy. Let's not do that.
absolutely. So now this is probably the most exciting um, NFL world for the week that we have here. So Russell Wilson got paid. I believe it was four, well he still has his last year under contract, so he's got 5 more years. And they were saying, so he's 29, so he'll be around 33 or 34. He'll be hitting free agency. But his extension is 4 year, 140 mil, with I believe it was at 65 million guaranteed.
Yeah,
It was
it's
around. It was, yeah. So, and I've asked this question around to a lot of people, and I'm going to ask you this question. One, is Russell Wilson elite?
oh yeah, I think that's without question. I don't
And
know who's questioning that, but they
he,
shouldn't be.
to me, I think he definitely is. He tier 1 or tier 2 elite to you? So to me, my tier 1 elite quarterbacks are Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers. I think Russell Wilson sits right at the top of tier 2, and
Yeah,
it's
I
no
would agree with
question
that.
that, right. And would you rank him? I would say he's top 7. I think he's pretty darn close to top 5 in my book. Do you think he deserves this kind of money though?
I don't think anybody that's an athlete that plays a game for a living deserves this kind of money.
Not at all.
But
And no, like it's ridiculous. And I think the Seahawks were put in a very I think they were put in a very odd position. It almost kind of seemed like Russ gave him this deadline, so that he basically gave him like 3 or 4 weeks to make up their mind and get a contract. And he says, and now I don't think this is true. I find this very hard to believe. I'll believe it when I see it, that he really wanted to go to the Giants, and the Giants lost Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, it would make sense because they have the money to do it now, to pay him. But if you're looking for more rings, you might as well stay in Seattle. I don't think New York was the answer. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. I don't think anyone should be making that kind of money. And now, who do you think is next up?
I
Like, I think
think
it's going to be Patrick
it'll
Mahomes.
that'll be the next highest paid player in the league.
At least a contract very similar to that.
You're gonna laugh at me when I say this, but this is the most Dallas thing ever, and it'll be
Dak
Dak
Prescott. Yep.
Prescott.
Yep.
His contract's coming up to a
I heard
his
that. Go ahead.
his contract's coming up soon, and it just they're gonna do what I think they can to keep him, and
Yeah,
he knows that.
they were saying NFL analysts were saying that he was next up to receive a big contract like that, and now they said that his extension wasn't going to be like Russell Wilson, but they said it was going to be somewhat similar to that, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. He's not a top 10 quarterback in my book. I think he's no, by any means, he's not elite at all. I would put him in my top 15, but yeah. So very briefly before we go into the draft, yesterday they released the NFL schedules. I guess why don't we pick one team that just looks kind of intriguing to you? Who's going to have a tough road? Who's going to have who has a really good chance of making the playoffs of a team that didn't last year?
I mean, the only answer to that question is Cleveland, right? I think common knowledge, anybody would smart money is on Cleveland being the most improved team in the league this year. They have 4 primetime games. Everybody's going to see this new fun team, this trio of Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. along with Baker Mayfield.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's going to be a lot of fun to follow this season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And honestly, if this buzz wasn't going around, I wouldn't say it. But my team is going to be the Packers, just because all the stuff that's been going around with the Mike McCarthy stuff. And they asked LaFleur about it, and his exact words were, yeah, I know about the relationship, and quite honestly, I don't care. And as a new head coach, like, why? Who cares about the past?
Yeah,
You're moving on to the future. So
that's the attitude he should have. That's
right, exactly. And like, it'll be interesting to see the kind of relationship that they build with LaFleur and Rodgers. And they open the season. They host. Actually, I'm sorry, they're in Chicago. But they host the Vikings week 2. It's going to be a tough road. Because they go to Dallas, they go to Kansas City, and then San Francisco. Honestly, I think could surprise people if they stay healthy. But they are in LA for the Chargers. I could not tell you who's going to win the NFC North at this point. I would like
a lot of off season to go still, though. So
exactly. I think it's too early. The draft hasn't even happened yet. We are actually exactly 1 week out. But with all this McCarthy stuff going around, I would be very interested to see all the acquisitions, how they do, and how LaFleur and Rodgers, what type of relationship they build in the first year. And I think, like I said, 1 year of talent doesn't determine a head coaching job. But I think Packer fans are going to watch, even non-Packer fans, they're going to watch very closely at that relationship, especially now, even in the first year, because I think the first year matters a lot too, quite honestly, the most. Okay, so we are a week away from the draft, and the past few weeks we've been naming 5 kind of, not necessarily under the radar, but like basically players that are outside of the top like 5 to 7 that we think are definitely players to watch. So I guess I'll start. So I'm a big fan of these quick receivers in this draft. And last week I did Andy Isabella. Week before I did Paris Campbell. And I'm going to finish off with Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel had a 4.48 40. and he's outstanding with his route running and his run after the catch. If I'm looking at teams that definitely need a receiver, and I think Deebo Samuel he'll be a day 2 pick. Definitely looking at a team like Baltimore, even the Denver Broncos, seeing as Demaryius Thomas has been gone for a while. Even the Houston Texans, they could definitely use more speed to help Deshaun Watson. Um, yeah, I'm a big fan of these speedy receivers, and especially Deebo Samuel coming out of the SEC. Um, he has the SEC is probably arguably the most competition in the college football, and he's played 4 years of that. So I think that'll help. I think him playing 4 years in the most difficult conference is going to benefit him a lot in the NFL. What about you?
My first guy, I went with Tyree Jackson, the quarterback out of Buffalo. He's a guy who he's not the most impressive quarterback on film with his arm. However, he sticks out like a sore thumb because he's 6'7", 245 pounds, which I don't have to tell you is just gigantic. And he can run, and he's got a pretty big arm. However, his accuracy, his throwing motion, his mechanics, his footwork all need a lot of work. So I definitely think Tyree's a day 3 pick for a team that's very quarterback, that they're good at developing quarterbacks. I look at a team like maybe the Rams take a chance on a guy like him. They signed Bortles to a 1-year deal to back up Goff, but then you should maybe look at 2020 for who's going to be the backup, and maybe you grab a guy like Jackson who, if he ever really learns how to throw accurately and he works on his footwork and you can fix his mechanics, who knows what you have here with an absolute physical stud. So I definitely think that he's a guy to look out for on day 3 as a potential project.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of, I guess, for the exception of Drew Lock, like all the first round potential quarterbacks. I think a lot of these quarterbacks are going to be interesting to see where they land. Tyree Jackson, even Gardner Minshew, just those type of raw quarterbacks. See how well they groom into the quarterback they turn out like they want to turn out to be. So my second guy is actually just wrote an article, ended up on Bleacher Report. It was Chris Lindstrom. I like all the big guys like Jonah Williams and Greg Little, but honestly, like those are huge guys, and that's going to benefit them a lot. But they can't play anywhere around. Like they can't play any other position other than tackle. They could try, but speed will definitely get to them. And Chris Lindstrom can play all 5 sides of the ball, or all 5 sides of the offensive line. And now one thing that will concern is his arm span. It was only about a 30 to 31 arm span, which could draw concerns to scouts as to like finishing blocks, and struggling to get his initial blocks. He has minor issues, but he's just been soaring up. He's kind of been fluctuating into the first round or the second. I just saw one today. It was the 24th pick. So I definitely think he's first round potential. And a lot of these linemen could honestly go anywhere. And I think it seemed like even the Patriots or the Saints, as soon as Max Unger retired, and if Chris Lindstrom even falls past that, the Saints are my number one team that I think should go for Chris Lindstrom because Max Unger was such a surprising retire. I guess other teams would be even the Raiders, um, the Texans, Vikings, Panthers. There's a lot of teams that are lineman needy, and this draft is deep. And I think Chris Lindstrom is one of the most complete linemen in this draft.
I actually saw a mock draft today that had Lindstrom going 12 to the Packers. I think it was
Really?
McShay and Capers, yeah. So he's definitely been shooting up draft boards everywhere.
Definitely, yeah.
My next guy is Byron Murphy, the cornerback out of Washington. I personally believe he's the best corner in this draft. And also another interesting nugget, he is Mike Bibby, the ex NBA player's nephew, which that doesn't mean anything to NFL teams, but it's just kind of cool that he's got a bloodline of athleticism in the. So the thing I like most about him is he does everything pretty well. I wouldn't say he has any real negative or inferiority on the field. He's the best in a cover 3 zone scheme. That's what he does best. He's a zone cover corner, but he can play man. He's just not as good. And I worry about a guy like that playing man, even though he's better in zone coverage, because I always think back to Nnamdi Asomugha when he went from the Raiders to the Eagles. However, I think Byron Murphy will be okay. And I like his fit with Kansas City the best. I think Kansas City is really has a need at corner, and they've always done well with guys from Washington. So I definitely think that that's a guy they should target.
Yeah. I'm big fan of a lot of these corners. Even DeAndre Baker, just the way he finishes every block, every tackle. I think Byron Murphy could be seen in the first round as well. So my next guy, when I said before, like quarterbacks to groom, I definitely think Jarrett Stidham is the perfect guy. And now there's a lot of mock drafts that have Drew Lock fluctuating everywhere from even the Packers at 30 to the Patriots at 32. Now, if the Patriots don't draft a quarterback, my number one man is Will Grier to the Patriots. But if they wait until maybe the third round or even the second round, because Jarrett Stidham has the potential to fall there, um, he would be the perfect quarterback to groom behind Tom Brady. He is definitely a dual threat quarterback. He has an arm. Um, he's very mobile, and I think his accuracy could be fixed. Sec. Um, but I think he's the perfect quarterback to groom. He's a transfer from Baylor. He threw for over 3,000 yards this past year, and he is like he has an arm. Like I wouldn't really say similar to Patrick Mahomes' arm, but like I think if he could groom out to be like kind of get the arm strength similar to that, or even a guy like Russell Wilson, in terms of arm strength, um, I definitely think he'll. I think it. I don't want to say it depends on which team he goes to, but I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in this draft in regards to like grooming to success. How about you?
My next guy is Dalton Reisner. He's a right tackle from Kansas State. He's a guy Pro Football Focus graded out very well. He was their top guy in pass efficiency, and he was also their number one run blocker from last year in this draft class. So I definitely think Reisner is a very safe first round pick. You know what you're going to get. You're going to get quality run blocking and pass blocking. I also do think that He's a guy some people think will eventually move to guard, but I believe he can stay at tackle. I think he's the perfect Brian Bulaga replacement. I've fallen in love with him as the Bulaga replacement at 30, but I also see the Chargers as a fit at the back half of the first round at 28. He could also dip into the early second round, but I do think Reisner gets his name called on day one.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we could see quite a few linemen taken in the first round. Guys like Jonah Williams, Cody Ford, Andre Dillard, who's my
Jawan Taylor.
Jawan Taylor, even my like Andre Dillard is probably my favorite lineman in this draft. I think Lindstrom definitely has the potential. And yeah, I think Dalton Reiser's a gimme as well. My next one is Irv Smith. So I think there's quite a few fits for Irv Smith, even the Packers, if they don't pick a tight end in the first round. My number one fit for Irv Smith would definitely be the Patriots. I think I just love the way Alabama produces tight ends. OJ Howard was massive, and his build is definitely similar to Irv Smith. And I think Irv Smith, like his stat line is unbelievable when it comes to like run after the catch, and it almost seems like if you look at it, he's almost faster than Gronk. Um, but then again, Gronk kind of regressed because of injuries. Um, but I do think Irv Smith could definitely be a first round pick. Um, I do think we could see three tight ends in the first round. I think it's a definite possibility. I could also see Irv Smith going to the Texans. But my number one pick would be um, definitely be the Patriots. Uh, I think he'd be the perfect replacement as his similar build to um, Gronkowski, and which is interesting because they compare him to Benjamin Watson. Um, it that kind of surprises me. Cause yeah, that actually kind of surprises me, and it kind of makes sense too for I guess footwork and their speed off the ball as well. Um, and OJ Howard also excels at um, his route running as well, and I think he's the perfect replacement for Gronk. And as soon as Gronk retired, I immediately thought Irv Smith. Now, Noah Fant falls, you can't really go wrong, but I think Irv Smith has a lot more of the size than um, Noah Fant. All right, how about you?
My next guy is Draymond Jones. He's a defensive lineman out of Ohio State. And he's not in that first or second tier of defensive linemen, which I think we'll see 7 defensive linemen get drafted in probably the first round, with Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, Ed Oliver, Jerry Tillery, Dexter Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, and Rashawn Gary. I think Draymond Jones is that 8th guy, and I think he's there because he lacks technique. He's going to need a team that's going to be willing to help him with his technique. But what they are getting is darn near elite athleticism and probably the best first step in the draft. So I look at a team like Cincinnati, who could use defensive line help, Atlanta, who could use it, even the Titans, or maybe even Seattle. There's a lot of teams that could use his help on that defensive line. And with a little bit of technique, I think you could have an absolute day 2 steal in Draymond Jones.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And my last one is, quite honestly, another steal in the day 3 pick. He's projected to go round 5. but I think he could slide in there early day 3 is Jaquan Johnson. I've the more I watch him play, the more not necessarily compare him, but I like his aggressiveness as well as Nasir Adderley's. I would say Jaquan Johnson and definitely Nasir Adderley are the two most aggressive corner or aggressive safeties in this draft. And they compared him to Bubba Baker in regards to his arm span and definitely quickness and footwork. If I'm looking at a team that could use Jaquan Johnson, especially if the Packers don't pick him, I could see Green Bay picking him as a day 3 pick. Even a team like the Seattle Seahawks, if they don't grab Adderley in the first or second round. But I definitely think Jaquan Johnson could be a steal wherever he lands, and I think he could slide his way into the early day 3 round 4. How about you?
I too went safety with my last guy, and I went opposite end of the spectrum. I went with a guy who I think could be the first safety to hear his name called on either day 1 or day 2, and that's Juan Thornhill from Virginia. He's a guy who early on in the draft process, I wasn't very high on him, but the more I saw him, the more I read up on Juan Thornhill. I now believe he is the best safety in this draft class. He allowed the lowest passer rating of draft eligible safeties at a 43.8. He is very consistent. You know what you're going to get out of him. He ran a 4.4 240. I think this is a guy that could go at either 30 to the Packers. I think the Seahawks may grab this guy in the first round. I think he's the best safety in the draft. He should be the first one to hear his name called. That's what I got. He's going to be the most consistent guy.
Yeah, and I definitely think if you're looking at guys that are going to start right away at the safety position, it's almost tough to say just because so much has happened in free agency. It honestly would not surprise me if there isn't a safety taken in this first round if Seattle doesn't take one. But I definitely think a guy like Adderley or even Thornhill definitely have the best chance of all the safeties of becoming an NFL starter. Now, Deontay Thompson does have the height, but I personally, him and a guy like Jonathan Abram, I think it'll be a while before they start, and I think Jaquan Johnson could develop into a very aggressive player like he is already right now. But it'll be interesting to see who the first safety is. A lot of people are saying Nasir Adderley, Juan Thornhill. I'm sure a lot of people are still going to say Deontay Thompson. He's certainly just been falling more and more. I see him as a day 2 pick already now from the 3rd round. Okay, so before we end here, we have the team of the week, and I'll let you start.
I went with the Clippers, and here's why. I know they're probably going to lose in the first round, and it'll probably be in 5 games, but they still got to beat Golden State in Oakland. They have a historic comeback, and it showed free agents that this team can beat a great team without a superstar. So maybe they are just one superstar away, and that will help them lure a guy like Kawhi Leonard in free agency this summer. So that's why I gave them the nod for team of the week. Who do you have?
My team of the week was almost a given. It was the Houston Rockets. James Harden put on a 32-point triple-double, 13 rebounds, 10 assists, MVP performance against the Jazz last night. And again, I'm still going to stand by the comment and say the Jazz are overrated. not saying they're terrible, but like I do definitely think they are a weak team in the playoffs. But I think Houston came into this with with all healthy guys coming in hot, and even James Harden. Like James Harden is still at the prime of his career, and I think if he wins the MVP over Giannis, you literally cannot complain about that
No, I will.
because why? Because he definitely deserves it.
He
Giannis is a given. Giannis is a given, but the only player that I will not complain about if he wins the MVP award over Giannis is James Harden. But Giannis is definitely more deserving than James Harden because he's better all around and he's more complete.
The only reason I say that is James Harden, when Russell Westbrook won it, said that the MVP should be about winning. Well, if it's about winning, then it's Giannis's award. If you're gonna say something, it probably will come back to bite you eventually. And now James Harden, this is coming back to bite him, saying that the MVP should be about winning. And it should be. He was right.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be close. I'm pretty sure Giannis is still in the lead. Um, at this point, I think it's a given, and it really depends. They're definitely going to play the factor if which team makes it farther in the playoffs.
No, the voting's already in.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, then it's probably Giannis.
Yeah. But all right, let's go to
So
player of the week.
my player of the week was Russell Wilson. I definitely think he won big time because of that extension. And as a player, like it's business. Like, and I guarantee there's probably some fans that are saying, "What kind of a contract was that?" But when you're a quarterback in the NFL and you're in your prime like him, and you're a top 5, top 7 quarterback, it's business. Like I think he played it. I think the way he played it was smart, giving him the April 15th deadline. Because I think if he wouldn't have been as aggressive as he was, I don't think we would have had a deal until training camp. I think they would have waited out too long, and I think Russell Wilson definitely played it. And personally, like I definitely don't think he deserves that money, but it'll be interesting to see how he plays it out. And I've heard this is kind of laughable to me. I've heard people say, I had one friend say that he was Chad Henne with legs. And I'm sorry, like I have to bring that up because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I've also heard that he just sucks at passing. Like, okay, a quarterback is a lot more than just passing. Russell Wilson is complete. If you're talking about a quarterback with athleticism, it's definitely Russell Wilson, probably a top 3 like quarterback, right? Like top 3 to 5 athlete quarterback in the league right now. Like he can do anything. And I've been told go watch his stat line or go watch his games. He just throws it up and he's like, okay, like yeah, like he doesn't do that half the time. He and his pass like they're saying that he's Chad Henne with legs, but he's still throwing 66% completion rate. And he had over 3,000 yards, around 3,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 110 passer rating. You cannot tell me that that is not a tier 1 or tier 2 elite quarterback, and you cannot tell me that that is not good. Like it just blows my mind, and I don't think he deserved that money, but I do think he will prove why he deserves that contract, and that is why he's my player of the week.
I threw a curveball with mine, and I picked Israel Adesanya, the UFC fighter who on Saturday won the middleweight interim championship. He fought Kelvin Gastelum in probably the fight of the year. It went all 5 rounds and it went to a decision, and now Adesanya is going to fight Robert Whittaker to try and unify the belt and become the undisputed champion. But Adesanya had a tough road to the belt. He's worked for everything, and I'm very happy for him that he is now the interim champ, and I'm excited for his bout with Robert Whittaker later on in 2019.
Yeah, and I think the boxing and MMA world is going to get very exciting, especially as the summer goes on or starts. Well, that is all we have for you today. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at I am Sam underscore Daring 68. Christian is I love Brent Suter, and our Twitter feed for C&S-Sports or C&S-Sports is C&S-Sports feed 2. Our Instagram is C&S-Sports, and our Facebook page is C&S-Sports Podcast. And next week is the NFL draft. We are 7 days out, and we will be talking about only the draft, and we're going to do something that I'm very excited to do. So we're gonna record. We're gonna go on air the morning of the draft, and then we're gonna talk about what we'd expect, and then we are gonna go on air the Sunday after the draft. And I look forward to it, and I will see you all. We will see you all next week.